Well, I'm an extension master gardener like Barbara, and I've been also removing invasives. The one that I have a particular fondness for removing is goutweed, which is just very voracious. It spreads by root and it's messy, and we've been removing it every year. We have a team of people that come in and get it out, and we restore the soil and then plant good plants and then keep a check on it. And we've had some beautiful new gardens evolve because of that effort. So it's painstaking, but also rewarding. So, but today we're going to talk about the combination of food gardens and pollinator plants. And when Barbara and I were talking about what to do, I just thought, well, not a lot of people think about combining um, vegetables and flowers. Some people think that it's okay to have the vegetables in one place and the flowers in the other, the fruit tree orchard over there. But it's really nature's way to integrate everything together and support each other. There's lots of really good science about the communication between plants. All right, off we go. I like to start with a land acknowledgement. And so this meeting is being hosted on Dakina, which is the ancestral homeland of the Wabanaki, Pennacook, and Abenaki peoples, past and present. And we acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land, waterways, and the people who have stewarded Dakina throughout the generations. And the source for this is the Indigenous New Hampshire Collaborative Collective. So here's what we're going to focus on today. When we get to the sort of the vegetable garden discussion, finding the right spot, different types of design options that you have in terms of the format of the garden, how to set up your soil for success, because we know it is all about the soil and the billions of organisms within it that help the plants thrive and grow. Sort of a list of the top, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 easiest plants to grow that you'll have success with. And being married to a gardening guy, I get to experiment and see all the experiments with the different plants and varieties, and some of them work really well, some of them don't. But I'm just one of those, the Nantes carrot, every single year it comes up for me, and I can get really big carrots. It's great. The little red Detroit beets are the most reliable things ever. So I'm of that sort of ilk, staying in the lane with the things that really work, that I am not going to go, is it going to come up or not? But Henry loves to experiment, which is also fun. And then we're going to talk a little bit about concerns about pollinators, which has been raised, and then pollinator-friendly flowers, and then some resources.
What was the carrot variety?
Nantes, I think it's called Nantes. Big, bodacious, successful, pretty reliable. Yeah, okay. So the idea of integrating your food crops with pollinator-friendly plants is not anything new when it comes to nature, but it kind of can be a new concept for a lot of people and think, I just want to grow food or I just want to support pollinators, but they go hand in hand. And so there's a lot of research about how pollinators support the global food supply, and that's really, really vital. And this little chart, while it's not that easy to read, it comes from a resource that is, I think it's a university resource, but it's got the different percentages of how pollinators support the growth. And most of it is fruit trees and raspberries and blueberries. A lot of fruits are supported by pollinator habitat and pollination. And so when you think about some of the vegetables, there aren't that many that need pollinators, like lettuce doesn't need pollinators, potatoes don't need really pollinators. So it's really interesting to look at something like this, and you can just kind of Google what percentage of food is supported by pollinators, and lots of stuff comes up. But this is the first time I've seen it broken down into like the highest level of support for pollinator food is they're essential for kiwi, melons, pumpkins, watermelons, cocoa beans, and Brazil nuts. They're highly dependent for avocados, nuts, and peaches, plums, pears, raspberries, blueberries, cherries. So lots of the fruit that we love is supported by pollinators. So that is why it makes good sense to support them in our own gardens. There's a quick story about the agricultural economy. There was some research done at UVM Extension about how much revenue is generated with the blueberry crop vis-a-vis the pollinator support. And so there was this, I think there were some varieties that they chose that weren't native and some varieties that they chose that were native. And the production, as you might imagine, was quite a bit higher for the native blueberry plants. So that helped to help the commercial blueberry growers learn about the importance of native crops. Okay, so choosing your garden location. This is our garden, a new raised bed, and you can see some squash and various, you know, brassicas there, and some straw that is the mulch that we put in the past because this is a pretty soggy area. Although it gets good sun, it's pretty wet. So one of the things that's really important is the plants obviously like sunlight. So if you're going to start a new garden, you want to make sure that the place has sun at least 6 to 8 hours a day. Some crops like it cooler, like our peas and onions and some of those cool weather crops that we can only grow in the early spring or late fall. But sun is really important. Good soil drainage, which we don't have, so that's why we raised the bed up and put new soil in. Um, Access to water is pretty important, especially these days when we kind of have these up and down weather patterns, and drought can happen one summer and excessive rain the next. But having a good source for water for when we are in drought, and then choosing drought tolerant plants if you can, is a good strategy for that. Protection from the wind, because the wind dries the plants out faster. Soil fertility, as you know, is really, really important. And I know you know Kat Buxton, another master gardener, brilliant soil brain, who has studied to the nth degree the billions of organisms that are under the ground that we don't see that are supporting our food health. Fencing, if you live in an area that is a little bit more remote. We have deer that kind of come through, but we have a dog. So I know people that have 8-foot fences around their vegetable gardens, and it works very well to keep the deer from munching on things because there's some kind of intuitive skill that they have to know when something's just about to ripen and be picked. They come in and grab it. So I've had so many people say, I was just tomorrow. I was going to go tomorrow and pick my cucumber. So a fencing can be helpful. And then in garden design, Gordon Hayward, who's a Vermont garden designer down in Westminster, he has a lot of books out. He's done a lot of garden designs. And one of the takeaways that I had from him, listening to him in lectures, is to start with the path. Whenever I design something new, I always start with the path. Where am I going to walk in this space? What do I want to enjoy? What do I want access to? And that's often people do the reverse. They'll plunk the garden in and they're like, I can't get to that part. I can't get to that part. So if you start with where you're going to walk, where you're going to drag the hose, where you're going to make the wheelbarrow go, where you want to walk through your beautiful pollinator garden, then you'll have more success and more enjoyment. So these are different types of garden design. So clearly you can lay down plastic or cardboard and solarize the grass and create your soil that way. So you're killing all the perennial grasses and weeds. So that takes time. It's done a season ahead. Before you want to have your garden in, you're laying down your plastic or your cardboard. I prefer cardboard, obviously, because I am the no plastic queen. And then you'll want to amend the soil with some good compost, obviously. And then a soil test is pretty important because we have mostly acidic soil in New England, and some vegetables and flowers really like it a little bit sweet. Pollinators not so much because they've grown up with the soil here, so they're adapted. But vegetables, some of them thrive on sweeter, what's known as sweeter soil, which is a little bit less acidic than what we have naturally. So there are amendments that you can get the soil test at UVM Extension, send your soil in, they'll send it back with an analysis. You can call them and say, what do all these numbers mean? And then they'll tell you how to amend your soil. Here's some other choices. Raised beds are a little bit easier. I'm kind of moving to those these days as I age and want to have a little bit more height to the gardens. So the raised beds can be useful if you've got a wet area. They can also be useful if you want to have a smaller garden and not really have a huge big patch, they can help contain the weeds a little bit better, easier to weed, easier to fill with soil and replenish the soil. So generally, they're becoming more and more popular with a lot of folks for vegetable and flower gardening. And then this upper right, that sort of, it's a galvanized steel option that seems to be pretty popular these days. I've seen a lot of them in backyards. They do require quite a bit of installation time with little rivets that keep them together, but they're pretty sturdy and durable, and they can work well just as well as when you're choosing the wood. If you're going to do a raised bed, just avoid pressure treated wood, obviously for the chemical migration that can happen into your vegetables and fruits. Let's see. There we go. So on the right is Gordon. He's a master. What's his name? Yeah, yeah. He is such a great presenter. He's a master gardener, and he specializes in like growing things in hoops and extending the gardening season. And so this is him with his raised bed and his archway, kind of like the cow gate steel thing where he has his squashes, and he's a master at that. So that's just one option, is having a raised bed and putting your arbor into it and growing your squashes up instead of on the ground. That can give more air circulation and kind of keep the bugs off a little bit better. And then on the left is Henry building a raised bed. So these are mounded beds, so that's a little bit higher, but it doesn't have the wooden frame around it. So that's an option too. Easy to keep up. You can put your straw around them in the pathways, and it gives you a little bit more planting space and easier to reach. And then we have one of these on the bottom left. This is a veg trug. We don't promote any brands or anything, but the idea being that you can just stand up and garden. And I saw a very good example of this in Denver when I was traveling a few years ago, which was at a senior citizens housing. And they had it was like as big as this space, it was like their community garden, all with these raised beds. So people that had mobility issues, people that were in wheelchairs could easily access those. And I love them for that, because you can grow your greens in them early enough because the soil warms up faster. So it's an interesting option if you want to consider something like that and you want to have a smaller space. And then containers is also an option. Again, try to avoid the treated wood and plastic if you're doing this. And then, excuse me, one of the key considerations, if you're going to do something like tomatoes, kind of like a deep and wide root system. So pretty big pots, even a whiskey barrel or a couple of them would be good to let the tomatoes have their root systems spread out the way they want to. And then you can also garden up with your cucumbers and your squashes in these containers pretty easily.
Plastic, is there a reason that you discourage?
Well, I have been reading a lot about how plastic is made with oil and chemicals, and some of the quality of the plastic it varies. And so it doesn't necessarily break down, it just degrades. So some of that degrading could leach stuff. But I think especially black plastic, there has been a lot that has been learned about the chemicals in particular in black plastic and the contents, like it's used computer parts and electronics that go into it. So it just has the contents are just scary for human consumption. But that said, it's reusable. They're reusable, so they can be used. But maybe if you wanted to use them, maybe stay away from black as a choice, and maybe go with a terracotta color or some other color. But there isn't a ton of science on that yet. Just what I've read focuses on the black plastic. And so here's some other designs that are just unusual. They're not the standard rectangle or square. So you can do circle gardens. You can, go to a community garden if you don't have space at your home to build a garden. There are these beautiful sort of sculpted, designed pathways that will never get weeds, but then they will in about 20 years. And then these sort of very interesting raised pillars that you can do So, you can be creative if you want to have something that's artistic and aesthetic as well as functional and delicious and supporting pollinator health. Okay, so this is the soil food web that I was talking about earlier and that Kat likes to promote. It's just an example of how much life is teeming in the soil. And now, my dad, when I grew up, my dad was an organic gardener. He followed somebody named Ruth Stout, the No Work Garden.
Oh,
Um,
she just died recently.
she died a while ago.
I just saw a big piece on her, that's all.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, yeah. Where was that?
I think it was in New York Times.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, she's now, her whole method is coming back now.
Yes, right.
Stoudt, I believe. Maybe, yeah. And so she was a Connecticut gardener and worked very closely with Cornell and the Extension Service on her method, which was to throw down straw on top of the soil and just leave it there and keep throwing straw on top of the weeds. So that straw would break down and enhance the soil. And to plant, she just sort of like, scooted apart the straw and put the seed in and let the sun hit just that little spot for the plant. And then when it got up and got green and was growing, she would tuck the straw around it. And she had huge yields. She had really good success in her gardens with that method. So I grew up reading that. And so that's kind of like lasagna gardening a little bit. And the idea is that you don't want to disturb the soil because we have all these amazing microbes and little organisms underneath that support. So now no-till is sort of a trend that people are saying, oh, that's not till, that's really going to destroy these guys. And the life is in like the top 5 or 6 inches. So if you're tilling, you're like messing all that up and bringing up rocks and all that. So as little tilling as you can do is more beneficial for those microbes to help support life. And then mulch is a good idea. If you don't like to weed, like I don't, as long as it's sort of a fairly natural material. So we like to use chopped up leaves, which you've heard, I'm sure you can run over your leaf pile with your lawnmower, chop it up and throw it in there. And we have been doing that in the last couple of years in our flower gardens. And I can really attest that the weed growth has been suppressed by that method better than with pine bark mulch that you can buy in a bag or you can buy in bulk. And then straw is another favorite, and I do use the Ruth approach and just grab a little extra piece of straw and throw it on any weeds that are, stomp them and then throw the straw on. But those are the two kind of preferred mulches if you're going to mulch. Otherwise, if you really love to weed, have at it. Yeah.
It's a wet summer. How do you deal with your weeds and sow beetles
Yeah.
and slugs?
Yeah. Well, there's beer for the slugs. You can do a little beer trap.
That works.
I've had people say it works. We just, the philosophy of letting nature run its course and do its thing is something we try to strive for. A good example is in our tomato bed one year, we had the tomato hornworm, which is that really big, green, ugly thing. Yeah, they are beautiful in a way. And then they munch away. But there is a moth that is a natural predator for that, and I forget the name of it. Yeah, it's a wasp, right, right. So that natural wasp predator, you just let the wasp predator do its thing, and you don't have to worry about picking all of the hornworms off. So there's probably a sort of a companion philosophy or theory or science around the things that you mentioned, but um, if you have good drainage, depending on how much rain there is. But we have had summers where the plants suffer from the excessive rain for sure. So, one year I think we dug out our lettuces and moved them because they were just getting drenched and soaked and looking all unhealthy. So,
Watercress, we'll all start using.
yes. But here's like sort of the basic, easy to grow list of vegetables that they're probably going to be mostly, whoops, uh, pest pest resistant. You know, you're probably not going to get a lot of pests in these, and but they could come. But again, if the soil is healthy, you're less likely to have the pests that are going to give you damaging your vegetables. So it just really does come down to making sure the soil is healthy and happy and fluffy and full of nutrients, and get it tested for the right uh, pH. This is something that it took me a while to learn, like, because you're so enthusiastic right now. 70 degrees. Let's plant X, Y, Z. Let's plant the tomatoes. And then you hear people say, my tomatoes, they were terrible this year. They died right away. And when did you put them in? May 12th. Oh, so they probably froze and they probably were too wet. They really like hot, dry, consistent, 55 and up nighttime temperatures to survive. So this is really useful. Um, the cold crops that can thrive in 40 to 50 degrees, peas, radishes, carrots, beets, Swiss chard, potatoes, onions, kale, lettuce, spinach, broccoli, cauliflower, like those, I wouldn't plant all of those right now, but, according to this, you could. But maybe it would work for you, maybe it wouldn't. But it definitely, the peas and the onions, the radishes, they will definitely survive. The carrots, because they're so tiny, they might get a little too soaked, but you can use your judgment. Definitely lettuce.
Overnight temperatures.
Yep. Then up to, yeah, so overnight. Yeah, so sorry, the soil temperature, which is affected by overnight temperature. So if it's like now, like today, pretty warm and it carries into the evening, you can do a test and take the temperature of your soil before you plant, and that's useful. And those raised beds will warm up faster than the ground. Um, and then soil that's 50 to 60, cilantro, corn, tomatoes, cucumbers, which is usually kind of June-ish, maybe early June. And then the warmer temperatures, 60 to 70, snap beans, eggplants, peppers, muskmelons, pumpkins, squash, zucchini, and okra. And I have pretty much failed every year with bell peppers in the ground. And I finally said, okay, I'm just going to put it in a pot on the back deck, give it its own big pot, and see what happens. And it, of course, was full of wonderful bell peppers. So that's something I learned about my own garden, that just the peppers just don't like whatever it was in the ground. But in their pot, contained hot soil, hot, air, not much water, they loved it. Quick on companion planting. There's lots of, you can Google this to find out what your favorite crops like to grow next to, but just turning it back to you, what are some of the companion plant ideas that you have come across in your vegetable?
Marigolds,
Right, with,
everything,
yeah,
to keep the bugs away.
mm-hmm, yep. Anybody else?
Tomatoes with asparagus and tomatoes with basil too.
Yep,
You mean right next to each other, like in the same patch?
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
Any other partners? So this is a pretty good list. So basil, parsley manages pests for the tomatoes. Basil attracts bees, and then the pollination is supported with that. Parsley attracts other beneficial insects to protect and pollinate the tomatoes. Potatoes, I did not know this. Garlic in between the potato rows wards off things, and lettuces and cabbages. So the scents deter aphids and other things that you might consider to be pests. And then cabbage, broccoli, and kale.
And potato beetles?
Potato beetles aren't on that list, but Japanese beetles, maybe that's what a potato beetle is? No, that's a different beetle. Yeah. So potato beetles maybe doesn't get affected by that, or maybe they just forgot it. And then nasturtiums are always fun. You can put them in your salads, as you probably know. And then cabbages and carrots, sage. But I've never really had problems with flies on my carrots. so I'm not familiar with that pest.
Don't jinx yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Cucumbers and pole beans, sunflowers. You've probably heard of the three sisters, five sisters, seven sisters. So having support by the sunflowers for vine crops. And then tansy, which I have always loved. Tansy's, it's a very fragrant, pungent, beautiful native. And I knew that it repelled ants, but I did not know that it did other bugs, like ladybugs and cutworms. So that was news. Okay, so now we're going to, any questions on vegetable gardening, anything to share that you want, like that's really worked for you, that you've had great success with, that you want other people to know, or any sort of challenges or mistakes that we could all learn from?
I've got one specific question.
Go ahead.
If you were going to plant a kiwi trellis, what would you make it
Probably cedar.
of? Wood.
Yeah, as opposed to, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen a wooden kiwi trellis. I have not seen any other kind of kiwi trellis, but doesn't mean you couldn't use the kind of cow grate, the 5-inch square steel, galvanized steel fencing. That's very sturdy.
I think that would hold. But
Yeah, it holds squashes, holds zucchinis up above. But the kiwi arbor that I witnessed was at a school up in northern Vermont, and it was an arbor made out of cedar, which is kind of cool. And they're tiny, the kiwis that we can grow here are little ones.
So the arbor was made of
Cedar.
cedar
Mm-hmm.
because it was water resistant?
Yeah, it lasts a long time. I don't know a ton about wood quality, but you do. Cedar.
Yeah, cedar, it's just more, it's more resistant to rotting than wild things.
But it also sort of is fragile, and if you drill into it, won't it sort of chip, or
I don't know, I think it'd be
maybe if
pre-drilled.
it was thick enough, maybe it wouldn't.
I haven't worked with it much, but I know people use it in outdoor structures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we use.
Not to stick in the ground so much, although it's better than something to actually put in the ground.
Yeah, it took 25 years for the cedar posts in our little tea house to break down. So
That's pretty good.
that's pretty good. Yeah. Any other sharings? Go.
Should I be worried that only one little asparagus has come up? Why one?
Oh my gosh.
How many years are you in?
4 years in.
4 years.
Yeah, well, I planted from seed. So I started them from seed, so I didn't eat any till last year. I ate just a little bit, I let lots of it grow, and I've got one. But maybe it's a warm corner and maybe everyone else is gonna come out.
How many did you plant? Do you know roughly?
You have,
They're both male and female.
Mm-hmm.
you got compost on it?
Yeah. I put a bunch of leaves on it over the winter, so they,
And it's well weeded. Doesn't have any competition with
you know what,
weeds.
some wild strawberries moved in.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking so healthy, and I couldn't like
Yeah.
them out. I said,
They're
Yeah.
shallow, right?
Wild strawberry.
They're fine. Yeah.
"Ton of them."
Yeah.
what's the pH of your soil?
I'm not sure what it is right in that area. I haven't done that area. I think it's a bit acidic in general.
So maybe.
Asparagus likes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they like a little bit of acid. I'm not sure what the exact pH is for asparagus, but our patch has been declining too. So
Ours has two from age. We're
Yeah.
thinking of
yeah,
Jenny's the gardener, but we're thinking of replacing,
Yeah.
because it's really old.
yeah. I've seen some patches that grow in the most unorthodox places, like beside barns and full of weeds, and they do great. And some patches that are very well cultivated and taken care of, and they don't thrive. So it's really, yeah. You could check the Asparagus Society of America, see what they say.
There is.
I don't know. Um, all right, we're going to go into the pollinator habitat discussion now. And what is the timing? Okay. Ooh, my goodness. Okay. Zipping. Um, So there are a lot of considerations, just like vegetable garden, for pollinators, for the garden design feature. So pollinators need water, they need places to rest, they need the food that they're going to eat that helps them stay energized so that they can do their jobs. They are fascinated. It's fascinating. They are attracted to different colors, different pollinators to different colors, and different shapes of flowers, which we'll get into. So there is a lot of information out there. There are about a dozen at least really quality resources. If you Google how to have the best pollinator garden in the Northeast, you're going to come up with a slew of resources. And UVM Extension has a very extensive pollinator health, pollinator support section on its website with videos and resources and manuals and links. So there's so much information, but this is sort of just the top layer. So invasives are key to removing invasives, grass, weeds. They do, no plant really likes competition for that. So that's an important feature. And then the other thing is that because the pollinators, they don't want to use a lot of energy. They're very energy efficient. So planting in large clumps, like your bee balm, a dozen or so, or at least 6 or 10. So that way the bee can just bounce from little flower to little flower instead of having to fly halfway across the yard, which uses energy that they don't want to expend. Why natives should be pretty clear, but the one takeaway, if anything, from this is the concept of coevolution. And so the pollinators and the plants and the animals have evolved together over millennia. And so all climate change is local, the pollinator health and their companions that they love to support each other have co-evolved over time. We'll see a really good example of that in just a little bit. And the pollinators have evolved to eat and thrive on and be able to digest the foods that they get. And so when you've got non-native plants, it's not as easy for like the baby birds. If you've got like an invasive moth or caterpillar and the mom brings it to the baby in the nest, it's not as easy for the little babies to digest. So it's really hard for them to kind of thrive if they have non-native stuff constantly being thrown at them. Here's a list. There was a researcher, Jane Sorensen's a teacher at UVM Extension, and one of her research students, they came up with this list of really good pollinator, like top 10 pollinators for our area. And they did some research with some nurseries and kind of studied the pollinator flow in and out, touching these plants and pollinating the plants. So these are the ones that they came up with, which are the sort of the top 10 natives to succeed in helping pollinators. If you only want to do 10, there is, I think Jane Sorensen's research suggests at least 6 to 8 different varieties of plants to support the maximum number of pollinators. So this top 10 will get you there. And then if you want to dig really deep into this, Jane has produced this amazing resource, which you can get on the UVM Extension website. And it has annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs, and vines, most of them native. It shows their bloom time, their botanical name and their common name, and then when they bloom and what colors they are. And it's a really amazing resource if you want to try to design something in your space. It tells you if they like shade or sun or part sun. So if you are starting from scratch for any reason, this is like the go-to resource for what you want to do. And then it helps you also think about diversity. So trees, plants, shrubs, vines, annuals, perennials. And if you get like a diverse selection, then you're going to enhance the pollinator support.
And her farm is a nursery for.
Yes, for native plants. It is it's the Vermont Pollinator. It's got the word pollinator in it. Is it? No, it's up in, Northeast Pollinator, Riverberry Farm. Riverberry Farm. Yep. It's sort of like up in, not like Hardwick area, I want to say. But Maybe, yeah. I've not been there either. But you can order pollinator plants directly from her. She ships them to you. They're really good quality. They're in like 2-inch plugs, I think. So you have to kind of watch them carefully after you plant them. You can't just put them in and let them sort of survive on their own because they're babies. But they're really good quality, and you can get you can get mixes, any kind of pollinator mix that you'd like to start with. So it makes it sort of the selection process very easy. Okay, so this is just one slide on all the ills that pollinators have to deal with in life. And probably none of these are new to you, but it really makes it difficult for pollinators to thrive and reproduce and sustain their lives. So all of these things, if we can manage them in our own little corner of the world, it helps the pollinators here. And if we can manage them on a more systemic way in our communities by supporting campaigns for reducing pesticide use on playing fields, for example, and invasive removals, conservation commissions are great at supporting invasive removal, having events, so participating in those. So you can engage with these different things to try to help reduce the threat. Fragmented habitat is a big one because, again, when they're traveling, they need places to rest, and they don't often get that in a sea of concrete with lots of lights. So and light pollution is one of the major sources of death to moths, which are primary pollinators for us. So here's just quick rundown of the various types. We have 300 bees, native bees, and 2,200 native moths. So you had said, Walker, that you're not seeing them. And it may be that they're just hiding. I don't know. They're just not easy to see because maybe they're under the plant, maybe they're under the leaf. But I don't know enough about the decline data to comment on it.
It's mainly the flowers, and as you said, the flowering trees the sort of decorative ones, maybe they don't need, they're fragrant, but maybe they don't need all that much.
You're saying the
I mean,
pollinators.
they're just not attracting them.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the non-native discussion where they're not going to go because they haven't co-evolved with those non-native trees and shrubs and plants and perennials. And Doug Tallamy, University of Delaware researcher, excuse me, entomologist, he suggests a ratio of 80% natives to 20% ornamentals, he calls them. And so now with this increased discussion about the idea of native plants, there are a lot of nurseries that are now sort of offering native plants, offering organic native plants, which is really key. So I had an experience at a nursery where there was a shipment of shrubs that came up from down south, and the bees were like buzzing all around them. I go, oh wow, I forget what the shrub was. Awesome, they're loving this. This is great. The next day, the nursery coordinator told me that they were all dead. And so whatever that shrub was had been treated with something for its transport, for its life, and the bees went after it, but they killed them. So they're delicate. They're delicate. They're hardy, but they're also delicate. And pesticide influences their life. It's really really sad. But this is just like, so flies and birds and bats, and there are more pollinators than you think about. It's not just the bees, even though is some research that suggests the bees kind of have the bigger role to play than some of the other pollinators, but there's so many different kinds, and they all have co-evolved to pollinate different plants. Here's where I was talking about before. They need water, shelter, food, but also color. This is so fascinating that the coevolution of the colors. So bees are attracted to blue, purple, violet, white, and yellow. Butterflies, red, yellow, orange, pink, and purple. Hummingbirds, yellow, orange, pink, purple, but mainly red. And so diversity in your color palette is going to support more pollinators. And the shape of the flower. as you might imagine. So buttercups, these are kind of an open flat shape. So the bees can settle on them easily. They don't have to go inside anything and then get outside. They can settle right on the open shape and get their nectar. This wide, flat pad attracts the butterflies. Again, they're thin and flat themselves, so they just land on the flat pad of the flower and do their thing. And tubular, this is like the fascinating co-evolution idea, is that the hummingbird with its long beak can put its beak into the cardinal flower, which is a tubular. So they have co-evolved to support each other. That flower is long, and the hummingbird is the only pollinator that can get inside and get the nectar. How cool is that? And so here's a bunch of plants that we can consider. Dutchman's breeches, Jacob's ladder. This is sort of a seasonal spring, summer, fall bloom discussion here. These are great little matted plants that let the pollinators rest. And they respond to like some of the earlier pollinators whose life cycle is showing up now. And then the spring, the further, more pollinator-friendly plants. I love geranium maculatum. It's a wild geranium, and that is so beautiful for us as well as attractive to the pollinators. And then if you've got this bloodroot, which is a cool shade plant, is it blooming right now or is it done? Just about finished?
I think it did finish.
Yeah. So it's kind of nice to see that come up. It's an early spring flower, and the pollinators like that one. Here's some more summer ones, which you know, bee balm and lupin. And some people are concerned that lupin will spread too much because it has so many seeds. They get distributed by the wind, and you can get big patches of them. So, it takes a while, but if you're concerned and you have a small space, just plant a few and see what happens. And as you get too many, then you can give them away.
I can't grow lupins.
Really?
I plant them, never see them again.
Huh.
It's like they decide they will not go where I want to put them.
Ah, yeah, nature is like that. Yeah.
That is forget-me-nots. I can't grow forget-me-nots.
Oh my gosh. Well, we have thousands of forget-me-nots. They just they are everywhere.
Damn.
They do like it damp and shady, somewhat shady, although they grow in most conditions. So yeah, about the lupins, is it dry? Because they kind of like it a little dry and meadowy.
Maybe a little too weedy.
Maybe, yeah. Nobody likes root competition. Here's that center picture, if you can see it, of the hummingbird going into the cardinal flower. How fun! Here's some fall blooming turtlehead. Jerusalem artichoke. I will say, if anybody's got experience with that, you know that it's very prolific. Spreads by root. It's kind of hard to get out. It's hard to clean, and prepare, but it's really good when you do get to prepare it. Do you use it? Do you have it?
Yes, I have plenty of Jerusalem art, and I just read today that if you boil them first, then they're not so hard to digest.
Yep.
The flowers?
The root.
The root, yeah.
Yep.
You hate to boil anything, but sometimes soup is safe. You can always make soup and it's delicious.
Yeah, and grind it up. And then remember the herbs. They're easy to grow, don't need a lot of care, pretty much grow no matter what. And when they flower, that's when the pollinators like to go jump on them. So you can, even if you forget the cilantro, which I always do, I can never get cilantro before it bolts. It's good, it's okay, it works out. And then you've got, fennel, chives, thyme. They're all super easy, fragrant, attractive colors to the pollinators. And then I'm going to leave you with a couple slides on sort of maybe changing our thinking, where before maybe our flower gardens were really clean at the end of the fall, cut everything back. There's a concept called chop and drop, which you probably are familiar with. This is just cutting things down and leaving it on the ground so that there's protection on the soil as well as for the pollinators who may want to be living underneath it for the winter. So in the spring, I haven't quite graduated to leaving the leaves everywhere in the gardens. But if you can, leave as many as you can. So we're evolving to that. And then in the summer, you can always supplement your gardens with more native perennials as you find them at plant sales and at nurseries. In the fall, I think it's Monarda and a couple of others have hollow stems where the bees can go live inside. And then pollinators need the shrubs and other protection for the winter. So all season, you can think all year long, you can think of ways to support pollinators. And then you can reduce your work and let things grow up a little bit. Right now, what's blooming beautifully in the lawn if you haven't mowed yet? Dandelions
Violets.
and violets. Yeah, so you can kind of lay on the grass and see if you have bees buzzing around you. But you can let things go a little bit, let the edges go. And there's some infrastructure that you can think about, like fence posts, birdhouses, benches, piles of wood, sticks that will support pollinator health as well. So that gives you less work when you let everything get a little bit messy.
Let your garden go.
Yeah, let your garden go. Yep. See what happens. When I first started learning about this idea, I had a lawn. I mowed it every spring, but I said, okay, well, I'm going to let it grow and see what comes up. It's the most beautiful array of wildflowers. I couldn't believe I was mowing it all down. And then more diversity is also was good. We've talked about larger patches of flowers, continuous blooms, lots of variety of color, shape, size. Aim for at least 80% native plants. And then here's just this huge resource, but UVM Extension is really great and has all of these. So if you just went to the UVM Extension website and found your way to the resources, it's the Master Gardener program under the Community Horticulture heading. You might have to take a few clicks to get there, but all of these resources are there. And then, that's it. Any questions or comments?
So I would like to ask you.